Good.
Yeah. Hi.
Hello, Andrea.
Thank you for your invitation, for your time. For the second time in my life, I'm in Henry Jackson site in London.
Make it a regular occurrence.
Okay. And I really want to thank you for your support of your nation, British nation, your organization, your team, for supporting Ukraine. You made a great contribution in the media, experts community. And now, 2 years after the full-scale invasion, 10 years after the beginning of the hybrid war by Russia against Ukraine. What are the lessons from the war we can see now? What are the success and where are some disadvantages? I don't know, some problems.
Well, I mean, it's a big question, isn't it? What are the lessons and how do we go? I think there are many lessons. I mean, you've touched this report here, a new report on cyber warfare. Well, I think, war is always a laboratory, isn't it, for new activities. And quite clearly, the Russians have used this conflict as a way of trying to develop their cyber attack capabilities, the way they knocked out satellites, disrupted communications. But of course, Ukraine's also been able to fire back. I mean, let's not forget the times that all the Russian generals are being knocked off because their comms were being traced in various ways, and Ukraine's mounted a very effective campaign, a PR campaign in support, which has worked very well in Western countries. The Russians have tried to sow disinformation. We know that the way this works. So there's a ton of lessons to be learned by analysing each of those bits. But if you take the overall picture, I think the big lesson to be learned is number one. When you have a putative aggressor on the horizon, believe them when they say and when they act like they're going to invade a country. Don't not believe them. I mean, normally dictators and autocrats actually tell you what they're going to do. If you look in history, it's very rare there's a complete surprise attack. They normally telegraph it. And so we saw with Putin, it was telegraphed all the way along, and it shouldn't have been a surprise when he actually went in. Secondly, the role of bravery, Ukraine's bravery in defending this. I mean, you'll remember 2 years ago, everyone thought, oh, this is it, the Russians will roll over Ukraine in 2 minutes. But they didn't. They didn't because of the bravery of Ukraine in standing up for the homeland and trying to repulse this evil attack on it. And so that tells you that individuals and national spirit matters, and morale matters in this sort of way. And then, of course, we've learned over the time that a numerically inferior force, because, of course, Russia's got 4 times the population of Ukraine, can still see off potentially a larger force if it is well trained, if it's supplied with the right machinery and weapons, and can then make a difference that way, tactically as well. So I think we've learned again that even a so-called military superpower like Russia can be defeated with that combination of that spirit, determination, but also the kit and the money to finish the job, basically. And that tells us the path, as we've kind of always known, haven't we, to how countries like Ukraine can win against aggressors like Russia. So the real, kind of interesting bit is, are the lessons being learned by the free world for this year for us to continue doing the same thing?
Well, about the free world. Recently, I visited Munich conference, Security Munich conference in Germany, and one journalist said very interesting thing that non-democratic regimes or systems, they are much more quick in creating allies than the democratic systems. So, what you see in the West, do our Western allies still very supportive in Ukraine, and do they have still the strategy towards Ukraine for the next year, plan A, plan B? Because I saw the briefing by Kamala Harris, the Vice President of United States, and she said in Munich that we don't have plan B, we have only plan A. But from your perspective, what you see in the next year, how crucial next year, this year?
Well, I think this year is a pivotal year in the war, and I think there is only plan A because plan B involves defeat. So that's the reality of it. So in my view, what the West have to do is back plan A to the hilt. There's no point in being half in plan A. We've spent a lot of money and supplied a lot of weapons already, but it's kind of been half in. It's not the sort of the really cutting edge sort of kit that Ukraine needs, and if it had, would punch a hole immediately in the Russian lines because of the way it would operate. So we've been half in. Well, the question now is, if we continue half in, it's going to lead to plan B. It's got to be full in. It's got to be fully in on every level. That means applying pressure to Russia on every level. It means supporting Ukraine on every level, recognizing that this is the year that things happen one way or the other. Either Ukraine punches through the Russian lines comprehensively and leads to a situation where the Russians have to reconsider their position comprehensively, or the war of attrition continues because Ukraine doesn't have the capabilities to break through, and inevitably that's going to sap Ukrainian morale, it's going to sap the willingness of the West to continue, and that's before we've even come to the US election, which may change things dramatically. And as a result, we're going to move into a scenario where Russia will have the whip hand and will ultimately be in a position probably to force Ukraine to sue for peace.
Well, my third and last question concerns the general geopolitical situation. We see now the new conflicts in Middle East, in the potential escalation in other parts of the world. What is the future of the new order, I would say, or do we on the eve of new geopolitical conflict, new Cold War, Third War, Second Cold War, or there is a very high probability of the regional war, for example, in Baltic countries or the post-Soviet countries? Because my colleagues from the Baltic countries, they really took seriously the threat from Russia in the Baltic regions, and as well as, for example, in Central Asia, Kazakhstan, or in Moldova. So it's possible to find some kind of consensus, some kind of political solution, or we should be ready for the new Cold War?
Well, a lot, I think, depends on how wars like Ukraine and Gaza end. Mm-hmm. I think this is the key thing. If those war ends with the aggressors in those conflicts, whether it is Russia or Hamas, somehow coming out claiming victory, or plausibly claim victory, mm-hmm. then we surely have a problem, because what that shows is that aggression can be rewarded. Mm-hmm. The moment you show aggression can be rewarded within the international system, it will encourage not simply those aggressors, but other aggressors to go, we see our opportunity, we can now do the same thing and gain rewards by doing so. For a long period of time, although there were conflicts in the world during the Cold War, it was cold, it was kept, within managed confines. Mm-hmm, it wasn't global war, it wasn't even major regional wars. It didn't occur in that sort of way. You had little wars here and there. But this wasn't, nobody thought necessarily that those wars would spark into bigger conflicts. And every time that did, for example, in 1973, when the Israelis were crossing over the Suez, having initially been pushed back but then pushed forward, the Soviets were threatening to bring nuclear weapons in, and the Americans were threatening to do the same. Everyone got away from that. But the problem we face in today's world is that if there is a sense that aggression is rewarded, well, where are the fail-safes? Where is the desire by aggressors to compromise? And I think that's why these conflicts, how they get resolved, the ones going on right now, have a major impact on what we were saying as to what happens next. There's no doubt, for example, that if Putin manages to secure large chunks of Ukraine in any sort of peace, well, what will happen is that just as Hitler took the Sudetenland in 38, in 39, he thought, I'll have the rest, thank you very much. And so there'll be a matter of time before the next bit gets rolled over. Or Putin goes, well, I'll take Belarus and I'll go through that way too. Because that's how aggressors respond. They don't stop. They know they have to keep feeding their population, as it were, with success. Because otherwise people go, well, the emperor's got no clothes, because look, things are actually really bad in Russia today. No, but if he shows them victories here, it's a standard deflection tactic. So that will happen. We know that if Hamas wins somehow in that war, well, other terrorist groups in the Middle East, other powers like Iran, will be emboldened. We know that China will watch all this and go, actually, maybe we could have a crack at Taiwan after all. So these conflicts have a major impact. And the best way to deter and prevent future conflicts along the lines that you've mentioned is to win these ones now. Because if you can do that and show that aggression is not rewarded, then you will have a much better set of outcomes than if you show aggression is rewarded.
Thank you very much for your answers, for your analysis, and for your support.
A pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Great.
Very good.
Very good, very good. Short and to the point.